For children of the 80s, it was impossible to visit an arcade without seeing a plethora of shoot-'em-ups. Influenced by the likes of Defender and Xevious, a large number of them were sci-fi themed, pitting a lone pilot against a horde of invaders from deep space. Culturally, it made sense at the time. Films like The Last Starfighter stoked the flames of spacefaring adventure in audiences and helped keep the popularity of the genre sky high. This meant that there were a lot of shooters released within a relatively short period of time. Some were great, some less so. It's interesting to look back at some of the games that fell in the middle of the pack because of a lack of interest, middling production values, or other such reasons. These games could feature ideas or aesthetics that fell somewhat outside of the norm. Act-Fancer was one such game. It wasn't the most well-known, and it certainly isn't the best example of the genre, but there are elements of the game that are worth exploring. Act-Fancer, or to use its full name, Act-Fancer Cybernetick Hyperweapon, is a side-scrolling shooter developed and published by Data East for arcades in 1989. This is likely a major reason why it isn't very well known, as 1989 and 1990 were fantastic years for arcade shoot-'em-ups. UN Squadron, Darius 2, Gradius 3, the list goes on. Act-Fancer is a spin-off of Data East's shooter franchise, Darwin, the name of which stems from the weapon upgrade system present across the series. Collecting power-ups causes the player's ship to evolve into new forms, bringing with it new types of weaponry. All of the games in the Darwin series feature this system, including Act-Fancer. The earlier games in the series are both vertically scrolling shooters, whereas Act-Fancer scrolls horizontally. The evolution system takes shape in Act-Fancer via the blue and red orbs that are dropped by enemies as you destroy them. Blue orbs trigger evolution into the next form up the ladder, whereas the red orbs extend the lifespan of the current evolution. This encourages players to be aggressive and keep pushing forward, as playing passively usually leads to your character devolving into a less powerful form as you hang back. You also need to constantly make decisions about whether you want to evolve into a higher form or not. Getting hit once devolves you back to your base form, whereas another hit in your base form will kill you. This all may sound a little odd if you're used to other shooters, particularly the bit about choosing to extend an existing evolution rather than stepping up to the next one. After all, shouldn't each step be more powerful? The issue is that each evolution has its own weapon system, and some are more useful than others, particularly for certain areas. For example, the second stage features a lot of high-flying enemies that can be difficult to hit. One of the mid-range evolutions features a spread shot that attacks above the player, which is extremely handy for this particular area. However, between avoiding attacks, trying to collect the red orbs, and dodging blue orbs, it can be extremely difficult to keep hold of this evolution. These sorts of situations can be quite frustrating, as you can be moving just fine, and suddenly collect an item by mistake, or simply devolve due to the time limit, causing your positioning to instantly go from good to disastrous. All in all, the evolution system seems like a neat idea that doesn't quite come off as well in a gameplay sense. One striking thing about Act-Fancer is the visuals. It's not a terribly proficient game technically. In fact, putting it up against its peers from the same time period shows a lack of animation and detail in a lot of the sprites, backgrounds, and special effects. The interesting part lies in the Geiger-esque art style, melding futuristic technology with alien biology to create a dirty, organic aesthetic. It elevates the game's presentation above its otherwise technically limited level. Unfortunately, the art style cannot compensate for some of the other shortcomings in both the visuals and the gameplay itself. One major issue is the lack of visual feedback, both when attacking and when being attacked. Getting hit whilst in an evolved form triggers a cool animation as you revert through all the previous evolutions back to the base level. But sometimes it can be hard to tell when this is due to being hit, or just your current evolution timing out and going back one level. It makes the game feel like a scramble, with it being difficult to decide on positioning and tactics in the moment, when your weapon and durability frequently changes at the drop of a hat. Movement is also a bit of a chore. Whilst evolutions eventually allow you to glide in the air for short periods of time, maneuverability in general is still never easy. Your character is relatively slow to move, easy to hit, and cannot shoot in other directions. You must rely on your evolution weapon, which is an unreliable prospect at best. There are also some very strange glitches, where your character will get stuck on the edge of ledges and moving platforms. Most of the best shooters feel responsive and speedy, whereas Act-Fancer feels sluggish and, sometimes, downright annoying to play. Act-Fancer is worth a look, even if it's just to explore some of the creative ideas present in its upgrade system and aesthetics. Just don't expect a shooting game to compete with the genre's best. Unfortunately, the lack of polish and frustrating gameplay hold this one back.